Welcome back. Today we're exploring a chilling case that shook Scarsdale, New York in the early morning hours of March 10, 1980. It's just before dawn when the police receive a frantic call reporting gunfire at the quiet, upscale home of Dr. Herman Tarnauer, famed creator of the best-selling Scarsdale diet. When officers arrive at the sprawling colonial house, they find a scene that immediately sets their nerves on edge. Inside the bedroom lies Dr. Tarnauer, slumped on the bed, bleeding from multiple gunshot wounds. Nearby stands Jean Harris, once a well-respected headmistress and longtime companion of the victim, holding herself upright with trembling knees. She claims it was all a misunderstanding, an accident amid emotional turmoil, but the details remain hazy. The initial responders speak in hushed, urgent voices. One officer radios for an ambulance, while another tries to question Harris, noting how her voice trembles and her eyes seem distant. Outside, the first hint of morning light stretches thin across manicured lawns, elegant fences, and the familiar silhouette of a neighborhood known for its safety and refinement. Within hours, the name Herman Tarnauer becomes headline news, and the community collectively holds its breath. The victim, a renowned cardiologist and author of a popular diet regimen, is widely admired for his clinical expertise and philanthropic gestures. The alleged shooter, Jean Harris, is no shadowy figure, but a known educator with a genteel background. The notion that she would fire a weapon is unthinkable to many who know her. As the police cordon off the driveway and begin their methodical search, an unsettling storyline starts to emerge. There are rumors of a love triangle, whispered suggestions of betrayal and heartbreak, and a simmering jealousy said to have boiled over on that fateful morning. This once quiet corner of suburban America is now ground zero for a sensational crime that will consume headlines and spark debate for years to come. Will the truth behind these fatal shots ever come fully into focus? Let's journey deeper into the heart of this shocking case, where love, anger, and tragedy collide under the veneer of civility. Her early years paint a picture of complex familial expectations, academic rigor, and mounting internal pressures, all of which may now hold the key to understanding her darkest act. Raised in a modest yet proud household, Jean Harris is born on April 27, 1923, and grows up in a suburban environment not unlike the affluent streets where the tragedy ultimately unfolds. Though her parents enjoy a stable life, financial struggles surface from time to time, leaving young Jean with a sense that security must be earned, never taken for granted. She is petite and well-coiffed, her graying hair styled neatly, her posture straight-backed, as if long accustomed to maintaining appearances. Those who encounter her in adulthood describe sharp, intelligent eyes, thin but expressive lips, and a deliberate manner of speaking. She favors well-tailored dresses, sensible heels, and understated jewelry that reflect a life of propriety. By the late 1970s, she is in her mid-50s, carrying herself with a poised elegance, even when turmoil stirs beneath the surface. Growing up, Jean's family encourages educational achievement as a path to respectability. She attends private schools, excels in literature and the humanities, and later pursues higher education, ultimately achieving a respected position as the headmistress of the Madeira School, a prestigious girls' boarding school in McLean, Virginia. Yet the demands of leadership weigh on her. Former colleagues recall her as meticulous, fair but firm, and dedicated to molding young minds. Behind the scenes, however, some report she struggles with anxiety and bouts of depression. She consults therapists sporadically, grappling with a sense of inadequacy and a longing for stable affection. She has endured a failed marriage, during which her ex-husband, an academic with a wandering eye, left her bitter and cautious. Financially, she stands on her own 2 feet, yet the fear of losing her hard-earned respectability gnaws at her. In social circles, she's admired but not intimately known. She is courteous, intellectual but reserved, holding her emotions tight. Some who knew her in passing describe her as kindly distant, never one to overshare. Yet beneath that exterior might lie mounting insecurities, a self-doubt that emerges, if only subtly, in tense conversations or long, pensive silences. Dr. Herman Tarnauer, born on March 18, 1910, was a towering figure by professional standards. Slightly stooped in his later years, his once dark hair thinning into silver, he carried himself with a confident, almost jovial air. He had made a name for himself as a cardiologist and reached widespread fame with his publication, The Complete Scarsdale Medical Diet, which climbed bestseller lists and placed him under a public spotlight. He drove a sleek car, attended charity galas, and maintained a busy medical practice where patients admired his straightforward advice. Those who knew him remember his ready smile and the way he turned on a professional charm that put anxious patients at ease. Privately, the doctor's personal life was more complicated. Known to enjoy the company of several women, he seemed reluctant to settle down into a single, monogamous commitment. Still, he was not devoid of warmth. Friends say he maintained close ties to his siblings and offered generous support to medical research initiatives. He had no children, and though he had been linked romantically to several women over the years, he never fully embraced fatherhood or traditional domestic life. His affair with Jean Harris spanned many years, though it drifted in and out of intensity. In his final months, many say he appeared content, even looking forward to semi-retirement and longer stretches of time spent with friends. On the night before his death, neighbors recall the glow from his bedroom light as he presumably read or reviewed his notes for the following day, still meticulous about his schedule and well-being. The setting of this unfolding tragedy is the affluent enclave of Scarsdale, New York. By 1980, Scarsdale boasts a well-earned reputation for serene streets lined with towering oaks, pruned hedges, and spacious homes that exude quiet affluence. In the late winter chill, patches of ice remain on sidewalks, and the dawn air feels crisp against the skin. The local economy thrives, families fill the country clubs, students excel in top-ranged schools, and few worry about safety or criminal activity. This tight-knit community values status, education, and discretion. Its residents would never imagine that, in a matter of days, their tranquil corner would be splashed across national headlines. The early 1980s bring a particular social climate. Feminism has taken firmer root, conversations about women's roles intensify, and the ideal of the traditional relationship grows more complex. The recent local scene has seen debates over educational reforms and whispers about changes in the tax code that might impact property values. Few notice any looming darkness. Crime rates in the area are low, and police rarely respond to more than traffic violations or occasional domestic disputes. When Jean Harris visits Dr. Tarnower at his home on that fateful morning, the weather is clear, but cold, with a light wind rustling empty branches. The house itself, a pillar of stability and comfort, now becomes a crime scene to be dissected. The bedroom is spacious and meticulously arranged, with crisp white sheets, neatly stacked books on a bedside table, and a gleaming set of medical instruments in the adjoining study. It will soon become a focal point for investigators, reporters, and a stunned community that suddenly questions how well they know their neighbors. Jean and Herman's relationship does not start in a dramatic encounter or through sudden infatuation. Instead, they meet casually in the mid-1960s at a social gathering of mutual friends. Jean, then newly divorced, is impressed by Herman's easy confidence, and the doctor admires her intellect and refined demeanor. They exchange polite words over a glass of wine, their conversation effortless. Over time, letters and phone calls bridge the distance between her professional life in Virginia and his practice in New York. Their early correspondence reveals a mutual respect and cautious affection. She is drawn to his intelligence, charmed by his paternal warmth. He admires her poise, sees in her a partner who can appreciate his academic pursuits. By the early 1970s, they settle into a pattern. She travels to Scarsdale on weekends, and he occasionally visits her at the Madeira School. They dine in quiet restaurants, see art exhibitions, and take long drives to enjoy New England's foliage. Their relationship, it seems, is stable but unconventional. There are rumors, even then, of other women circling around the charismatic doctor. Some acquaintances recall subtle tension in their dynamic. At gatherings, Jean's voice sometimes grows tight when another woman's name drifts into conversation. Herman, for his part, seems relaxed and non-committal, as though uncertain he can give Jean what she longs for, exclusivity and marriage. In private moments, Jean expresses her desire for a deeper commitment, more time together, and a promise of a stable future. According to Inside the Body letters uncovered later, Herman reassures her now and again, but his actions speak otherwise. He continues to see other women, sometimes blatantly, leaving reservations and suspicious hotel receipts. Those close to the couple note that as the 1970s draw to a close, Jean's behavior grows increasingly anxious. She calls Herman at odd hours, questions him about his schedule, and seems always on edge. Warning signs, subtle but persistent, show a relationship fraying at the edges. Friends try to intervene, gently advising Jean to loosen her grip and encouraging Herman to be more transparent. No one wants a showdown. Yet by 1979, tension escalates. Jean's health declines, she has trouble sleeping, takes prescription medication for anxiety, and occasionally breaks down into tears during quiet dinner parties. Herman withdraws further, insisting on his right to maintain a bachelor's freedom. They argue frequently, sometimes loudly enough that neighbors overhear snippets of raised voices through open windows. There are secret letters, there are conspiracy theories, there are psychotherapies, secret panda diaries, and phone calls where Jean pleads for honesty and Herman responds with dismissive half-answers. An invisible wall forms between them, yet neither ends it completely. It is as if both cling to what remains of the bond, despite its growing toxicity. In early March 1980, after a particularly strained phone call, Jean makes a decision that sets their tragic final encounter in motion. Whether she seeks understanding, closure, or confrontation remains unclear, but those who know them realize something is about to give, like a tightly wound spring about to snap. In the days leading up to the crime, a series of seemingly small events escalate the existing tension to unbearable heights. Jean feels increasingly sidelined by Herman's behavior. According to Herman Mozart's diary entries, on March 12th, she finds him on deck trying to throw some clothes overboard the ship. During a recess, Jean leaves and calls her cell phone. Under the name of Henry Huffman, on March 1st, she calls him late at night and demands clarity about their future. He responds with vague reassurances, but as soon as they hang up, he telephones another woman. Jean learns of this through a mutual acquaintance who lets it slip. Herman was seen dining with someone else just the previous evening. This confirmation shatters whatever illusion remains of their stable union. Jean's behavior grows erratic. She leaves her job at Madeira School earlier than usual, telling colleagues she has a personal emergency. She stops answering calls from friends, isolates herself in her small apartment, paces the room until dawn. A neighbor in Virginia recalls hearing her weep softly through the thin walls. Mentally exhausted, she contemplates confronting Herman once more, this time, face to face. Several times she considers writing him a final letter, but crumples each draft, tears falling onto ink-smudged pages. On March 5, she attempts to arrange a counseling session, calling a local therapist who advises her to find a healthier outlet for her feelings. She ignores this advice, feeling misunderstood and desperate. She drives up to Scarsdale on March 8, 2 days before the crime, to surprise Herman. She hopes to find him alone, to talk things through calmly. Instead, she sees another woman leaving his house that afternoon. She does not confront them then. Instead, she drives away, knuckles white, on the steering wheel, her heart pounding with rage and grief. As March 9 turns to March 10, the tension becomes unbearable. Jean's mood swings wildly. She tries calling Herman's line at 2 a.m., but there's no answer. She sits in her parked car a few blocks from his house for hours, contemplating what to do next. The darkness of the early morning street, the distant hum of a passing car, the sharp winter air, everything feels like a prelude to something terrible. Years later, psychologists speculate that a fear of abandonment and a deep-seated anxiety disorder may have played a role in her final decision. Close friends, now regretful, recall times they could have intervened more decisively, but didn't. Those last few hours are peppered with missed opportunities. No one calls the police to report suspicious behavior. No friend manages to coax Jean back home. Herman himself, sleeping soundly, is oblivious to the approaching storm. The final warning sign might be the sound of a car door shutting outside his house shortly before the gunshots. A neighbor, half awake, thinks nothing of it at the time. By sunrise, the crisis that has long simmered explodes in gunfire. On March 10, 1980, at approximately 4 a.m., a gunshot cracks through the silence of Herman's upscale neighborhood. The temperature hovers near freezing, the sky still dark, a faint breeze whispering through bare branches. Inside the tidy bedroom with its pale yellow wallpaper, Herman awakens abruptly. According to police reports, Jean has entered the room, clutching a small revolver. The exact sequence of events that follow remains a subject of intense debate. Jean later claims she only brought the gun to kill herself, that Herman's attempts to stop her caused the weapon to discharge. Prosecutors paint a different picture, a scorned lover driven to violence. Multiple shots are fired. Herman tries to rise from the bed, possibly to reach for his glasses, or to ward off the attacker. A neighbor who has insomnia hears what he describes as sharp, popping noises and then muffled shouting. Within minutes, Jean calls the police, her voice high-pitched and shaking, telling the dispatcher that someone's been shot. When officers arrive just before 4:30 a.m., they encounter a surreal scene. The house is quiet except for Jean's sobs. Herman lies on the bed, bleeding from wounds in his torso and hand. Officers find the revolver on a nearby table. Jean stands near the foot of the bed, pale, disoriented, her hands trembling visibly. In the first moments after the shooting, police radios crackle with urgent chatter. Paramedics arrive, but Herman's wounds are fatal. He is pronounced dead shortly thereafter. The crime scene yields immediate evidence: spent shell casings, bullet holes in the bedding and the wall, a half-written note on Herman's desk regarding patient appointments. Early on, Jean emerges as the prime suspect. She does not flee, nor does she deny being there. Instead, she insists through tears that it was all a misunderstanding. Forensic experts measure the trajectory of the bullets, trying to reconstruct the confrontation. A detective kneels over the bed, examining blood spatter patterns. In the soft overhead lighting, the room feels claustrophobic, thick with the smell of gunpowder and human tragedy. Outside, officers tape off the property, shining flashlights through bushes, searching for discarded items or footprints. Dawn breaks, revealing curious neighbors peering from behind curtains. The local newspaper's reporter arrives shortly after the ambulance departs, scribbling frantic notes, already sensing that this case will capture the nation's attention. The police waste no time launching a thorough investigation. Lead detective Andrew McPherson, a seasoned officer with a reputation for meticulous detail, heads the inquiry. In the first days, the team conducts a room-by-room search of Herman's house, collecting letters, photographs, and personal belongings. They discover a trove of correspondence between Herman and Jean, plus letters from other women. The letters, often passionate, sometimes pleading, begin to form a narrative of jealousy, heartbreak, and betrayal. Investigators interview neighbors, colleagues, and family members. A witness steps forward, recalling that on March 9 a woman matching Jean's description loitered near Herman's driveway. Forensic specialists analyze the gun's ballistic fingerprinting. They confirm it's Jean's firearm, legally purchased some years prior. Timelines emerge: Jean's departure from Virginia, her arrival in Scarsdale, her phone calls to Herman's home. Experts are called in to examine blood spatter and bullet trajectories, concluding that at least one shot was fired from close range. Jean is brought in for questioning. In the interrogation room, dimly lit, she sits stiffly, arms crossed. Detectives notice her voice is calm, yet strained. She insists on her version of events. "I never meant to hurt him. I loved him." McPherson notes contradictions between her statements and the physical evidence. Meanwhile, search warrants are executed at Jean's Virginia residence. Investigators recover major diary pages, detailing her anguish over Herman's infidelity. They speak with her colleagues at Madeira, who describe a recent decline in her emotional stability. The pieces fit together, suggesting a desperate individual pushed to the brink. As days turn into weeks, police consult psychiatrists, forensic psychologists, and handwriting experts. They confirm the authenticity of the letters, many revealing Herman's casual infidelities. The media clamors for updates. News segments show footage of Herman smiling at a book signing, Jean standing formally at a school assembly, and the stately Scarsdale home now infamous. On March 20th, a breaking development surfaces. A witness claims to have heard Jean threaten Herman in a phone call weeks before the murder. Though unverified, it adds to the prosecution's theory. By early April, the police present a conclusive timeline. Jean arrives at Herman's home armed with a gun, confronts him about his affairs, and in the ensuing chaos, she fires fatal shots. Jean Harris is arrested and charged with second-degree murder. On April 3, 1980, cameras flash as officers lead her out of the station in handcuffs, her eyes downcast, mouth set in a grim line. The community, once sleepy and complacent, is now faced with a high-profile trial that will dissect the private lives of two respected figures, under an unforgiving spotlight. The legal proceedings begin in late 1980 at the Westchester County Courthouse. Prosecutors charge Jean with murder, alleging premeditation and the intent to kill. Defense attorneys argue that Jean was driven by despair and confusion, not malice. They claim it was a tragic accident. She intended to end her own life and brought the gun for that purpose. Herman's attempt to stop her allegedly caused the firearm to discharge multiple times. Journalists packed the courtroom. True crime enthusiasts nationwide follow every twist. The trial becomes a media sensation, with reporters analyzing Jean's every expression and garment choice. She often arrives in conservative suits, hair neatly styled, her demeanor subdued and polite. The prosecution paints her as a scorned lover who lashed out violently. The defense depicts her as a vulnerable woman, overwhelmed by Herman's cruelty and indifference. Witness testimonies fill the weeks. Herman's colleagues testify about his kindness and mentorship. Friends of Jean recount her emotional vulnerability and years of devotion to Herman. The star witness is a forensic expert who methodically explains bullet trajectories and gunshot residue patterns, contending that the shots could not have all been accidental. Defense experts counter with psychological profiles of Jean, highlighting her depression and emotional fragility, suggesting that her mental state impaired her judgment. In closing arguments, the prosecution reminds the jury of the physical evidence: multiple gunshot wounds, no sign Herman attempted to seize the weapon. The defense pleads for understanding, urging the jury to see beyond the cold facts and recognize the emotional turmoil. After days of deliberation, the jury returns with a guilty verdict. Jean is sentenced to a prison term, sending shockwaves through her supporters. She appeals, but the verdict stands. The trial, a spectacle of heartbreak and blame, will influence future legal discussions about crimes of passion and the complexities of mental health in violent offenses. After the trial concludes and Jean begins serving her sentence, life in Scarsdale changes. Neighbors who once prided themselves on living in a peaceful enclave now double-check their locks at night. Schools hold special assemblies discussing emotional health and conflict resolution. Memorial services for Herman are held at a local synagogue, attended by family, colleagues, and loyal patients. Mourners recall his life-saving surgeries and philanthropic efforts. The community grapples with the realization that even the most respected figures can hide deep emotional turmoil. Nationwide, newspapers dissect the case's psychological dimensions. Pundits debate whether Herman's lifestyle choices contributed to his demise, or whether Jean's mental health struggles should have been caught earlier. Talk shows invite experts to speculate on warning signs that were missed. Over time, some credit the case with raising awareness about domestic tensions among couples who appear polished and successful. Psychologists note that crimes of passion, while statistically rare, reveal hidden fault lines in relationships that are often overlooked. Jean Harris's incarceration leads to changes in how some institutions handle mental health support for staff. Privately, some board members at schools and charities begin offering counseling resources and encourage early intervention. Meanwhile, the public devours books and television specials about the case, reinforcing its place in the annals of true crime lore. Herman's estate donates a portion of his wealth to medical research, fulfilling one of his long-term philanthropic goals. The long-term effects ripple through popular culture. The so-called Scarsdale Diet Doctor murder becomes a shorthand reference for a high society scandal brought low by human frailty. Lawmakers hold brief discussions about gun control and the mental fitness of permit holders, although no sweeping legislative changes occur immediately. Media coverage gradually shifts to other news, but the legacy lingers in dusty newspaper archives and in the memories of those who lived through it. Today, decades later, the name Jean Harris still conjures an image of a once respected educator undone by jealousy and heartbreak. The final takeaway beyond the sensation and sensationalism is a somber reminder that beneath the veneer of success and gentility, anyone can harbor dark emotions. Her story becomes a cautionary tale. Talk to someone, seek help, don't let resentment fester. In those quiet suburban streets, we learn that no community is immune to tragedy. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories. Let us know in the comments what you think motivated these events. Have you heard of similar cases where personal anguish ignited violence? Let's keep the conversation going, and if you found this story gripping, you might also explore the cases of Betty Broderick or the Menendez brothers, situations where family, relationships, and emotional strain result in unthinkable acts.